Good morning. Welcome to Ramblings with Joe. Last night, the wife and I were doing our regular routine, which typically includes a little snuggling on the couch while we look at some YouTube videos or Rumble or what's the other one? Well, those are the primary two. And this is one of the most enjoyable times of the day for me. Not so much because of the videos, but because of the proximity of the person that I care most about in life. So we're snuggling on the couch, and what comes up on the TV is our usual videos. I watch this show called Lefties Losing It. It's out of Australia. And then I usually switch over to Pierce Morgan. These are very, very right-leaning shows, and I'm aware of that. So we're on the couch and we're watching our typical shows, and I'm about to click on Pierce Morgan to watch a debate between these three pundits when a show that I forgot about catches my eye. The Smothers Brothers. And I haven't watched the Smothers Brothers in decades. I throw caution to the wind, and I forget about Pierce Morgan, and I say, let's do something a little different tonight. And the wife is deep into her phone doing something, probably some kind of studies. And I click on Smothers Brothers, and there's this rush of nostalgia that comes over me, and it is absolutely wonderful. I'm watching Smothers Brothers do their bits that they have done for many years, and that I haven't seen in many, many years. And I went down the deepest of rabbit holes to watch the Smothers Brothers. Need to get a little deeper into this coffee cup. Prior to the Smothers Brothers, a few weeks before that, I got tuned into the Carol Burnett show. And these are both kind of variety shows and comedy shows, and very clean, what is the word? Wholesome. These are very wholesome shows during a very tumultuous time. But the shows themselves were very, very wholesome. And they come from a time when I was growing up. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and the early 80s. They're just very straightforward comedy. I'm sure today they would be considered something along the lines of dad jokes, that kind of thing. But they're very enjoyable shows. They don't hold up well if you're looking for something like Saturday Night Live or, a comic from today. They're not on that level. They were from a much, much simpler time, but they held up for me. And that's where I kind of left the night. I left the night with thinking about the Carol Burnett show and having finished watch the Smothers Brothers. And I thought about my wife, and I had wished her good night, and I'd come upstairs, and I was doing my nightly routine, and I usually end up in bed for a minute, just laying there trying to either meditate or look at my phone and try and read up on the news or whatnot, and I kept being distracted. So my wife, if you ask her, what's your favorite television show? I'm sure without a heartbeat in between the question, the answer would be The Golden Girls. And I looked at The Golden Girls, and I thought about, in my mind, of course, and I thought, well, why does she like The Golden Girls so much? Well, this led to a buddy of mine that I used to work with, and he loves Westerns. He loved the Western show, and he's not the kind of guy that I would have put in the Western category, but he absolutely loved the Western shows. And I'm starting to see a pattern in these shows that we all kind of fall back on. So I thought about a couple of my other favorite TV shows from back in the day. We haven't had TV in decades. Not in our house. We've either had streaming, internet, or back when Netflix was a thing that came in the mail, they would send us discs. But since that time, we haven't had actual cable TV or over-the-air TV, for that matter. But I got to thinking about my TV shows that I like. And Kung Fu came up with David Carradine, and absolutely I think that and Star Trek, probably the two shows that kind of hit home with me, that spoke to me the most. So that's the list of, and one of them's not an actual show. One of them is just a buddy who watches Western, everything Western, simple Western movies. And not just movies, but he also watches TV shows like Bonanza and Big Valley. I thought back on that short list: Smothers Brothers, Carol Burnett, Golden Girls, Westerns, Kung Fu, Star Trek. And what made these shows so impactful to us? Well, I can take Golden Girls, which I found funny, and wholesome. I guess that's the word that we'll go with today. Golden Girls was more my wife's kick. I thought it was okay, and I would never turn down watching Golden Girls with her when she was watching it, because, of course, number one, it was with her, and number two, it was pretty good. I didn't appreciate B. Arthur's politics, but I was a fan of her strain of comedy, and I was definitely a fan of her military career. So I never gave up a chance to watch Golden Girls. Westerns, we actually have been watching Westerns fairly regularly, but they've been spaghetti Westerns. And that's something that kind of fits right into the Westerns category as well. So we got Carol Burnett, Smothers Brothers, Golden Girls, Kung Fu, Star Trek, and Westerns. So what made these shows most impactful? And I think it was their simplicity. I think it was the ability for those shows to steer clear of everything political. And yet that's not true either. Because the Smothers Brothers and the Carol Burnett Show both made fun of politics. But they didn't choose a side. They made fun of every political genre. The Golden Girls was definitely left-leaning, but it was simple, and it was wholesome, and it was just about survival. Kung Fu was just about a guy who was trying not to be in a violent world, who constantly found himself in a violent world. That kind of speaks to where we're at today. And Star Trek is a Western set in a science fiction stage. And it literally is. If you look at every episode, well, actually, one of the stars of the shows was first a Western star before he became to Star Trek. But McCoy, the doctor, Bones, trying to remember his name, and I can't at the moment, but he was a Western star before he was on Star Trek. I'm sure there were more of that. It was a groundbreaking show on many levels. However, what it really was a Western set in space. And Kung Fu, Star Trek, and Westerns all fall into that category where it's good guys versus bad guys. And they kept it simple. This is good. This is bad. Good overcomes bad. For the most part. There's always the exception that are very dramatic in those type of series. It was a look back on the shows that we watched. And I think that maybe that time that we all reach for, that moment in our childhoods and our early development where we recognize that there is right and wrong. This is set in concrete. It is wrong to treat people bad, and you must rise and defend the innocent. Those three kind of fall in there. Kung Fu, Star Trek, and Westerns in general. Those three kind of fall in there. And that's very impactful on a young mind. And I think it impacted my young mind as well. And then the Carol Burnett Show and the Golden Girls. I think that those were escapes. I think that those shows were an escape from the reality that surrounded the world at the time. Because if you look at the time period of Carol Burnett and the Golden Girls, and the Smothers Brothers, I guess the Golden Girls as well, But the Smothers Brothers, and Carol Burnett show, they were setting a very, very difficult time for our nation. So I consider those an escape. Also, we didn't have the choices we have now. We would sit in front of the TV, and if we were lucky, we would have choices of 3. If we were very lucky, PBS could be picked up and we would have 4 channels. Fox News, FX and Fox came much later. But the 3, ABC, NBC, and CBS, they were pretty standard for most major cities. PBS, you could reach out and get those occasionally, depending upon where you lived. In our area, it was WRENS, WCES. So I think that those 2 were an escape from reality. And I think that look, this is a very, very small portion of this show, but it's going to be a little bit political. I think MAGA tapped into that with the whole Making America Great thing. I think that they looked, and I don't know if they did it on purpose or if this was just something that they accidentally stumbled into, but I think MAGA kind of tapped into that mindset, that the Smothers Brothers, the Carol Burnett, and the Golden Girls, that simplicity of escapism, and looking back on it in that mindset of that time period when we were young and we just wanted all the ugliness in the world to go away. And those were the kind of shows that we went and we dove into. I think one of the other shows that may have impacted me as a child, as I grew up, was MASH. My mother absolutely loved MASH. And she would watch MASH, and we all watched MASH, but that was not an escape from reality. For the most part, that show was lighthearted, but it was set in a war zone. And the comedy that came out of that was I can't imagine having to write for that kind of show, but the comedy was very, very strained. So, although it did impact me, on this particular episode of Ramblings with Joe's, the Smothers Brothers, Carol Burnett, Golden Girls, Westerns, Kung Fu, and Star Trek, that escapism, that simplicity of right and wrong, which I think may just be another escapism, because everything is very, very gray area now. I suppose next week I'll have to address some of those gray areas that I find abhorrent. But for now, I'm kind of living in the past this morning. I'm kind of enjoying the simplicity of the Smothers Brothers. That was very enjoyable last night, and it was kind of me saying, you know what, let me put aside Pierce Morgan. Nothing wrong with Mr. Morgan. I guess my mind needed a break from the trials of politics. And it was thoroughly enjoyable. I sat there and laughed, and I think my wife probably was watching me thinking, look at this old fool laughing at a show from the late 60s, early 70s that is obviously not funny to her. But I did enjoy it. This walk down memory lane was brought to you by a cup of Ubora Rwanda coffee, which is absolutely delicious. I'm going to go downstairs and have a little bit more. I got a half a cup left. It's going to get a warm up. It's Friday, and it's going to be a good day. I can feel it in my bones. Of course, I always feel that way when I wake up and I get done with my podcast. I think that the world is a better place when you look at it through rose-colored glasses, at least for a minute. Got to take them off eventually, but it is Friday. This weekend, I'm going to help a friend. I think that that's an incredibly wonderful thing to do, and it really rejuvenates your heart when you do help someone in need. And that's my intention for the weekend. But today is Friday, and I am off to a job that I like, and I'm going to have a good day. I hope that you have a fantastic Friday. I hope that you go out and find peace, love, and dream. Until next time, arrivederci.